The stars trembled when the Kythera fleet moved through space. Their massive warships, each one stretching over 5 kilometers in length, cast shadows that could eclipse small moons. For 3,000 years, no civilization had dared challenge their absolute dominion over the galaxy's outer rim sectors. Admiral Vex-High stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Conquest, his 6 arms folded behind his carapace in a gesture of supreme confidence. Through the viewing ports, he watched as another world burned below them. The planet Zirion 7 had once housed 40 million beings across 17 different species. Now was nothing but molten rock and ash, another testament to Kythera's superiority. Status report. Vex-High commanded, his voice carrying the authority of countless victories. All planetary defense grids destroyed, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Zarthek. Population centers eliminated. Orbital stations reduced to debris. Total operational time, 4 hours, 17 minutes. Vex-High clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. Another perfect execution. The Kythera war doctrine was simple and brutally effective. Show no mercy, accept no surrender, leave no survivors. It had served them well across 3 millennia of expansion. The bridge crew worked with mechanical precision, their movements coordinated like parts of a vast war machine. Each Kythera warrior was genetically engineered for combat, their exoskeletons capable of withstanding pressures that would crush most organic beings. Their ships were equally formidable, powered by dark matter engines, and armed with weapons that could crack planets. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from High Command." "Route it to my private chamber," Vex-High ordered. In the privacy of his command quarters, the holographic image of Supreme Commander Thex-Vor materialized. The ancient Kythera's scarred carapace told the story of 1,000 battles, each mark a conquered world. "Admiral," Thex-Vor began without preamble, "your latest victory has been noted. Zirion 7 joins the list of our conquered territories." As expected, Supreme Commander, the locals offered minimal resistance. Their technology was primitive, their tactics predictable. "Indeed. However, we have new intelligence that requires your attention. Our advanced scouts have detected unusual activity in the Proxima Centauri system. There are reports of a previously unknown civilization making contact with several of our tributary species." Vex-High's compound eyes glittered with interest. "Unknown civilization? In our territory?" "Apparently so. They call themselves humans and claim to represent something called the United Earth Alliance. Our tributary worlds report that these humans have been establishing trade agreements and diplomatic relations." "Diplomacy?" Vex-High's laugh was a harsh chittering sound. "How quaint. Shall I prepare the fleet for another cleansing operation?" "That was my initial thought," Thex-Vor replied. "However, there's something unusual about these humans. They appear to have advanced faster-than-light technology, possibly even superior to our own. Their ships have been observed making jumps across vast distances in mere minutes." For the first time in decades, Vex-High felt a flutter of something other than confidence. In all their conquests, the Kythera had never encountered a species with technology that could match theirs. Their supremacy was built on technological advantage as much as tactical superiority. "What are your orders, Supreme Commander?" "Investigate. Determine their capabilities. If they pose a threat, eliminate them before they can spread their influence further. If they're simply another primitive species with one advanced technology, absorb what's useful and destroy the rest." "Understood. How large a force am I authorized to deploy?" "Take the 3rd battle group. 15 heavy cruisers, 40 destroyers, and support vessels. If these humans prove troublesome, I want overwhelming force available." Vex-High note that the 3rd battle group represented enough firepower to sterilize an entire star system. Whatever these humans were, they would learn the price of intruding in Kythera space. After the transmission ended, Vex-High returned to the bridge. His officers looked up expectantly as he approached his command throne. "Navigation. Set course for the Proxima Centauri system. Signal the 3rd battle group to form up and prepare for hyperspace jump." "Sir," his intelligence officer spoke up, "what should we know about our new targets?" "Very little. Vexai admitted. They're called humans. They appear to have advanced propulsion technology. Beyond that, we'll learn what we need to know by observing their wreckage. The bridge crew exchanged glances. In 3,000 years of expansion, the Kithra had developed certain patterns. They would arrive in a system, demand immediate surrender, and destroy anything that refused to submit. The process was so routine that many crews could execute a planetary conquest while barely paying attention. Estimated time to target? Vexai asked. 18 hours at maximum hyperspace velocity, sir. Excellent. Signal all ship commanders. We'll conduct a standard intimidation approach. Full battle formation, weapons charged, shields at maximum. I want these humans to understand exactly what they're facing before we destroy them. As the Eternal Conquest prepared for hyperspace, Vexai reviewed the sparse intelligence reports about their targets. The humans appeared to be a relatively young species, having only achieved interstellar flight within the last century. Their technology showed rapid advancement, but they lacked the millennia of refinement that made Kithra weapons systems so devastating. What puzzled them most was their approach to other species. Where the Kithra conquered and enslaved, these humans seemed to prefer trade and alliance. Several reports mentioned human ships arriving at worlds with goods and technology to exchange rather than weapons and demands for submission. Weakness, Vexheim muttered to himself. They lack the strength to take what they want, so they beg for it instead. The hours passed quickly as the fleet traveled through hyperspace. Vexai used the time to review tactical data and plan their approach. The standard Kithra formation placed the heaviest ships at the front, with destroyer screens protecting the flanks. It was designed to maximize the psychological impact of their arrival while maintaining maximum firepower concentration. When they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system, Vexhai was satisfied with the precision of their arrival. 15 massive battle cruisers materialized in perfect formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapon arrays. The sight alone had been enough to convince hundreds of species to surrender immediately. Sensor Suite, Vexhai ordered. I want complete tactical information on everything in this system. Sir, detecting multiple artificial structures in orbit around the third planet. Appears to be a significant industrial presence. Also reading several ship signatures throughout the system. How many ships? Approximately. Sir, this doesn't seem right. Report properly, Lieutenant. Sir, I'm reading fewer than 20 vessels total. All appear to be civilian or light commercial craft. No heavy warships detected. Vethai Thauwen, where was their fleet? Surely any species capable of interstellar travel would maintain some form of military presence. Communications broadcast our standard terms on all frequencies. The communications officer nodded and began transmitting. Attention, unknown vessels and planetary installations. You are in violation of Kithra territorial claims. You have 1 standard hour to evacuate this system completely or face immediate destruction. This is your only warning. They waited. In previous encounters, this announcement typically resulted in one of 2 responses: immediate panic and evacuation attempts, or desperate transmissions offering tribute and submission. The silence that followed was unusual. Finally, after nearly 30 minutes, a response came through. Unknown vessels. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the UEA diplomatic vessel Harmony. You've entered the Proxima system, which is under the protection of the United Earth Alliance and the Centauri Defense Compact. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. Vexhai's mandibles clicked in amusement. Protection? These humans thought they could protect a system from a Kithra battle group? Response, sir? Asked the communications officer. Tell them we are the Kithra 3rd battle group. Tell them they have 30 minutes to evacuate or be destroyed. Then, prepare targeting solutions for all human vessels. The human response came back almost immediately. Kithra vessels, we're not familiar with your species, but we're always interested in peaceful contact with new civilizations. Would you be willing to meet for diplomatic discussions? We have excellent facilities here that could accommodate various environmental requirements. Laughter rippled across the bridge. Several officers had to steady themselves against their consoles. Diplomatic discussions with the Kithra? The concept was so absurd it was almost entertaining. Sir, the tactical officer reported, I have targeting solutions locked on all human vessels. Shall I begin the bombardment? Vexai considered. Standard doctrine called for immediate attack after the 1-hour deadline. But something about this situation felt different. These humans showed no fear, no recognition of their hopeless position. Either they were incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. No, he decided. Let's see what else they have to say. I'm curious about this confidence. 20 minutes before the deadline, another transmission arrived. This time the voice was different, older, and carrying more authority. Kithra Fleet, this is Admiral Rebecca Morrison, commanding officer of the UEA 3rd Fleet. I understand you've made some territorial claims regarding this system. I'm afraid I can't honor those claims, as Proxima Centauri is a founding member of our alliance. However, I'd be happy to discuss the situation. 3rd Fleet. Vexai turned to his intelligence officer. I thought there were fewer than 20 ships in the system. Sir, those are the only vessels our sensors detect. If they have more ships, they're either outside our sensor range or using some form of stealth technology we're not familiar with. Vexai studied the tactical display. Even if these humans had additional ships hidden somewhere, what could they possibly field against 15 Kithra battle cruisers? Their largest detected vessel was barely 400 meters long, smaller than a Kithra escort frigate. Open a channel, he commanded. Let me speak to this Admiral Morrison directly. The channel opened, and a holographic image appeared on the bridge. The human who materialized was smaller than Vexai had expected, with gray hair and wearing a simple blue uniform. She appeared completely calm despite facing a force that could destroy her entire civilization. I am Admiral Vexai of the Kithra Dominion, he announced. Your deadline expires in 18 minutes. I suggest you use that time to order your evacuation. Admiral Morrison studied him with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. You're quite impressive, she said finally. I can see why your species has been successful in military endeavors. However, I'm afraid evacuation is an option. We have obligations to our allies here. Then, you've chosen death. Are you prepared to accept responsibility for the destruction of every human in this system? Actually, Morrison replied with what looked suspiciously like a smile. I was hoping we might demonstrate something first. You see, we humans have a saying, don't judge a book by its cover. We've learned that sometimes the smallest packages contain the biggest surprises. Vexai's patience was wearing thin. You have 15 minutes to clarify your meaning or face the consequences. Computer, Morrison said, apparently addressing her ship's artificial intelligence. Please power up the Yamato cannon and target the asteroid designated Charlie 7. Vexai glanced at his sensor officer, who quickly scanned the system. Sir, there's a large asteroid approximately 50,000 kilometers from our position, mass roughly equivalent to a small moon. What are you planning to demonstrate, Admiral? Vexai asked. The humans call it shock and awe, Morrison replied. Firing now. For a moment, nothing appeared to happen. Then Vexai's instruments detected a massive energy surge from the small human vessel. A beam of coherent energy, unlike anything in Kithra databases, lanced out across space. When it struck the asteroid, the result was immediate and absolute. The entire mass simply vanished, converted to energy in a flash of light visible across the entire system. Every Kithra on the bridge stared at their instruments in stunned silence. The power output required for such a weapon was beyond their understanding. No civilization in the galaxy possessed technology capable of that level of matter conversion. Impressive, isn't it? Morrison's voice cut through their shock. That was our smallest ship-mounted weapon, by the way. I thought you might want to see what you're dealing with before we proceed with more serious discussions. Vexai found his voice after several long moments. That's impossible. No known technology can achieve that level of energy conversion efficiency. You're right about no known technology, Morrison agreed cheerfully. We humans have a tendency to develop unknown technologies. It's one of our better qualities. Now, shall we discuss this territorial claim of yours in a more civilized manner? For the first time in his military career, Admiral Vexai found himself facing a species that might actually be more dangerous than the Kithra. The silence on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest stretched for what felt like an eternity. Every Kithara warrior present had witnessed the impossible, a weapon that could completely annihilate matter at the molecular level with surgical precision. The asteroid hadn't exploded or been vaporized. It had simply ceased to exist, converted to pure energy in a way that defied every law of physics they understood. Admiral Vexai's compound eyes remained fixed on the empty space where Charlie 7 had been moments before. His tactical computer was still trying to calculate the energy requirements for such a feat, producing error messages as the numbers exceeded its processing capabilities. "Sir," Lieutenant Zarthek's voice was barely above a whisper. "Orders?" Vexai didn't answer immediately. In 3,000 years of Kithara expansion, they had never encountered technology that fundamentally challenged their understanding of what was possible. Their own weapons were devastatingly powerful, capable of cracking continents and boiling oceans, but they operated within known parameters. This human weapon appeared to operate outside the boundaries of conventional physics. Sensor analysis, he finally commanded. How much energy would be required to achieve that effect? The science officer's carapace was visibly trembling as he worked at his station. "Sir, according to our instruments, the energy output would require approximately the total power generation of 17 Kithara homeworlds operating simultaneously." "From a ship that's smaller than one of our escape pods?" "Yes, sir." "Either our instruments are malfunctioning, or these humans have mastered energy generation techniques completely unknown to galactic science." On the view screen, Admiral Morrison waited patiently, her expression suggesting she was enjoying their reaction. Behind her, other humans moved about their bridge with casual efficiency, apparently unconcerned about facing the most feared military force in the galaxy. "Admiral Morrison," Vexai began carefully. "That demonstration was illuminating. However, one weapon does not make you invincible. We have 15 battle cruisers with sufficient firepower to sterilize this entire system." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "You're absolutely right about the firepower. We've been monitoring your vessels since you arrived. Very impressive ships, by the way. Your military engineers clearly know their business. However, I think there might be a fundamental misunderstanding about our respective positions here." "Clarify." "You seem to believe you're dealing with a primitive species that got lucky with one advanced weapon. The truth is considerably more complex." Morrison gestured to someone off-screen. "Commander Rodriguez, would you mind showing our new friends the welcoming committee?" A younger human appeared beside Morrison. "Certainly, Admiral. Kithara vessels, please direct your sensors to coordinates 77 Alpha by 1212 Delta, approximately 1 light minute from your current position." Vexai nodded to his sensor operator, who quickly adjusted their scanning array. For a moment, the readings showed only empty space. Then, gradually, massive signatures began appearing on their screens. "What are we looking at?" "Vexai demandet." "Stealth fields deactivating," Commander Rodriguez explained cheerfully. "We thought it might be rude to surprise you, so we're revealing ourselves gradually." One by one, human warships materialized from apparent nothingness. First came sleek destroyers, their hulls gleaming with an opalescent armor that seemed to shift and flow. Then, larger cruisers appeared, bristling with weapon arrays that looked nothing like conventional armaments. Finally, the massive bulk of Dreadnought-class vessels became visible, each one nearly the size of a Kithara battle cruiser, but with design aesthetics that suggested completely different technological principles. 57 vessels total, the sensor operator reported, his voice hollow with shock. "Displacement readings are, sir, some of these ships appear to have internal spaces larger than their external dimensions." "That's impossible," Vexai stated. "Space folding technology," Morrison explained casually. "Useful for maximizing internal capacity while maintaining maneuverability. We learned it from the Arcturians in exchange for medical technology. One of the benefits of maintaining friendly relationships with other species." The tactical implications were staggering. The Kithara fleet suddenly found itself outnumbered nearly 4-1 by vessels of unknown capability. Worse, these ships had been hidden so effectively that the finest sensors in the galaxy had detected nothing. "This still doesn't change the fundamental equation," Vexai said, though his confidence was evaporating. "We have conquered thousands of worlds. Our weapons are proven. Your technology may be advanced, but you lack combat experience. Morrison's expression grew more serious. Admiral, I need to share something with you about human military philosophy. We don't fight wars to prove our superiority. We fight wars to end them as quickly and decisively as possible, with minimal loss of life on all sides. A noble sentiment, Vexhai replied, but sentiment doesn't win battles. You're absolutely right. Technology, tactics, and strategy win battles. Let me show you something about human tactics. Morrison turned to her tactical officer. Lieutenant Park, would you mind demonstrating pattern Delta 7 against the Kythera formation? Yes, ma'am. Initiating tactical demonstration. Suddenly, every human ship in the fleet began moving simultaneously. But the movement was unlike anything Vexhai had ever witnessed. Instead of the linear formations favored by most military doctrines, the human vessels seemed to dance through space in complex three-dimensional patterns. They're moving in n-dimensional space, his navigation officer reported with disbelief. Sir, they're not just maneuvering in 3 dimensions. They're somehow utilizing spatial dimensions we can't even perceive. As the human fleet moved, their positions relative to the Kythera formation shifted in ways that defied conventional understanding. Ships that appeared to be moving away suddenly flanked the Kythera vessels from impossible angles. Others seemed to fold space around themselves, appearing in multiple positions simultaneously. It's called quantum maneuvering, Morrison explained. We learned the basic principles from the Heisenberg Institute back on Earth. Turns out that if you can manipulate quantum uncertainty on a macroscopic scale, you can achieve some interesting tactical advantages. Vexhai watched his tactical display dissolve into chaos. His targeting computers couldn't maintain locks on vessels that existed in quantum superposition. His weapons arrays couldn't calculate firing solutions for targets that might be in several locations simultaneously. This is a demonstration only, Morrison continued. We're not powering weapons or preparing for actual combat. I want to make that clear. However, I think you can see that any engagement would be complex. Stand down, Vexhai ordered his weapons officers, who had been frantically trying to acquire targeting solutions. He was beginning to understand that conventional military doctrine might not apply to these humans. Now then, Morrison said as her fleet settled into a more conventional formation, let's discuss this territorial claim. You mentioned that this system belongs to the Kythera Dominion. On what basis? Right of conquest, Vexhai replied automatically. We have claimed and held these territories for over 1,000 years. I see. And the species that were already living here? What happened to them? They were absorbed into the Dominion or eliminated if they proved incompatible with our civilization. Morrison's expression hardened. Eliminated? You mean genocide? We prefer the term inevitable evolutionary pressure. The strong survive, the weak are replaced. It's the natural order. Natural order. Morrison was quiet for a moment. Admiral, I think we need to discuss some fundamental differences in philosophy. On Earth, we learned a long time ago that strength isn't just about military power. True strength comes from building something better than what came before. Philosophy is irrelevant in the face of superior firepower, Vexhai insisted. Is it? Morrison gestured toward the tactical display. Your firepower isn't superior here. Your technology isn't more advanced. Your tactics aren't more effective. What exactly makes you believe you're in a position to dictate terms? For the first time in his military career, Vexhai found himself without an answer. Every assumption he'd operated under for decades was crumbling. The Kythera had built their empire on the simple principle that they were the strongest species in the galaxy. But these humans had demonstrated capabilities that surpassed Kythera technology in multiple areas. What do you want? He asked finally. Peace, Morrison replied immediately. Trade. Cultural exchange. The same things we offer every species we encounter. The Proxima Centauri system has become a hub for peaceful interaction between dozens of different civilizations. Everyone benefits. And if we refuse, Morrison's smile was sharp. Then you leave. Immediately and permanently. And you spread the word to the rest of your dominion that human allied space is off limits to aggressive expansion. You would dictate terms to the Kythera Dominion. We would protect our allies from genocidal aggressors, yes. It's not negotiable. Vexhai studied the human admiral's face and saw no deception, no bluffing. She meant exactly what she said. More troubling, she clearly had the power to enforce her words. "I need to consult with my superiors," he said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need. However, your fleet will need to withdraw to a minimum distance of 10 light minutes from any inhabited world while you deliberate. We can't allow armed vessels of unknown intent to threaten civilian populations." The casual assumption that they would comply with human demands was almost insulting. But as Vexhai looked at the tactical display, showing 57 human warships equipped with incomprehensible technology, he realized he had very little choice. "Navigation," he ordered, "withdraw the fleet to the designated distance." As the Kithra ships began their retreat, Morrison opened a private channel. "Admiral Vexhai, I want you to understand something. We don't take pleasure in forcing this confrontation. We genuinely prefer peaceful solutions to every problem. But we've also learned that some species only understand strength. You speak as if you've done this before. We have. The Zephyrian Empire tried to expand into human space about 30 years ago. They had similar ideas about the natural order and inevitable evolutionary pressure. After we had our discussion, they decided to focus their energies on internal development instead of external conquest. What happened to them? They're thriving. Turns out that all the resources they were spending on military expansion could be redirected toward improving life for their own people. They're actually one of our closest trading partners now." Vexhai was quiet for a long moment. "You're suggesting the Kithra could change?" "I'm suggesting that every species has choices. The question is whether they make those choices willingly or have them forced upon them by circumstances." Morrison's tone was matter-of-fact. "Think about it, Admiral. You've been expanding for 3,000 years, conquering and destroying. What do you have to show for it besides a reputation for brutality?" "We have the largest empire in the galaxy," Vexhai replied, though the words sounded hollow even to him. "An empire built on fear and maintained by constant warfare. How much of your resources go towards suppressing rebellions and enforcing submission? How much potential is lost every time you eliminate an entire civilization?" The questions were uncomfortable because Vexhai knew the answers. The Kithra military consumed enormous resources maintaining control over their conquered territories. Rebellions were constant, requiring brutal suppression that tied up entire fleets. And the loss of potentially valuable technologies and knowledge when civilizations were eliminated was a cost that had never been properly calculated. "I'll transmit your proposals to High Command," he said finally. "Excellent. And, Admiral, when you speak to your superiors, you might mention that we've been monitoring Kithra activities throughout this spiral arm. We know about the forced labor camps on Kepler Prime, the biological weapons testing on the vegan colonies, and the systematic elimination of the Altarian culture. Those activities will need to stop." Vexhai's carapace went rigid. That information was supposed to be classified at the highest levels. "How do you know about those operations?" "We make it our business to know about genocide wherever it occurs. The universe is a big place, Admiral, but it's not as big as it used to be. Information travels fast when you have friends in every sector." The implications were staggering. If the humans had intelligence networks capable of penetrating the highest levels of Kithra security, then the Dominion strength was even more illusory than he'd realized. "I understand your position," Vexhai said quietly. "I hope so, because the alternative to peaceful coexistence is something none of us want to experience. When humans fight, Admiral, we don't fight to conquer. We fight to protect what we love. And we're very, very good at it." The holographic image of Supreme Commander Thexvor flickered to life in Admiral Vexhai's private chambers aboard the Eternal Conquest. The ancient Kithra's scarred carapace seemed even more battle-worn than usual, his compound eyes reflecting the strain of ruling an empire built on constant warfare. Around him, the darkened command chamber of the Kithra Homeworld Strategic Center spoke of 3 millennia of military tradition. "Admiral," Thexvor began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "your report was illuminating. Are you certain of these human capabilities?" Vexhai had spent the last 6 hours preparing his report, knowing that his career and possibly his life depended on accurate information. Supreme Commander, I witnessed their weapons demonstration personally. Our instruments confirm energy output beyond our theoretical maximums. Their stealth technology rendered an entire fleet invisible to our best sensors. Their tactical maneuvering operates on principles we don't understand. And you believe they pose a genuine threat to the Dominion? Sir, I believe they pose a threat to any military force currently operating in this galaxy. Their technology appears to be generations ahead of our own in multiple critical areas. Thexvor was silent for several long moments, his mandibles working in a gesture that indicated deep thought. Behind him, other figures moved in the shadows of the command center. The Council of War, the most senior military leaders in the Kithra hierarchy. Admiral, in your professional assessment, what would be the likely outcome of a full-scale military engagement with these humans? Vexai had been dreading this question, but military honesty was fundamental to Kithra culture, even when the truth was uncomfortable. Sir, based on observed capabilities, a direct confrontation would result in significant casualties to our forces with questionable probability of success. Their advantages in stealth, maneuvering, and firepower would offset our numerical superiority. Even with the full might of the Dominion fleet, sir, we don't know the full extent of their capabilities. The force I encountered may represent only a small portion of their total military strength. Moreover, their technology suggests research and development capabilities that could rapidly produce new weapon systems. Thexvor leaned forward in his command throne. Explain. They demonstrated technologies that our scientists would consider impossible. This suggests either access to scientific principles we haven't discovered or research methods that accelerate technological development beyond our experience. If we commit to a prolonged conflict, they may develop new capabilities faster than we can adapt. The Supreme Commander gestured to someone off-screen. General Carvex, what is your assessment of Admiral Vexhai's report? Another voice spoke from the shadows. The technical specifications are indeed troubling. Our analysis division has reviewed the sensor data. The energy weapon demonstration alone represents a fundamental breakthrough in matter-energy conversion. If these humans can miniaturize such technology for shipboard use, their entire technological paradigm may be beyond our current understanding. And their intelligence capabilities? Deeply concerning, General Carvex continued. Their knowledge of our classified operations suggests surveillance networks we cannot detect. This implies they have been observing us for some time without our awareness. Thexvor turned back to Vexhai. Admiral, what were your impressions of their leadership? Professional, confident, but not aggressive. Admiral Morrison demonstrated tactical superiority without employing violence. She offered negotiations before threats, but made her capabilities clear when challenged. Vexhai paused, choosing his words carefully. Sir, I believe they genuinely prefer peaceful solutions, but are fully prepared for warfare if necessary. And their demands? Withdrawal from what they consider their sphere of influence. Cessation of what they term genocidal activities. They specifically mentioned several of our classified operations by name. The silence that followed was ominous. These were military leaders who had built their careers on absolute certainty about Kithra superiority. The possibility of facing an equal or superior force challenged everything they understood about their place in the galaxy. Supreme Commander, a new voice emerged from the shadows. Perhaps we should consider the broader strategic implications. Speak, Admiral Nextar. If these humans possess technology significantly advanced beyond our own, and they're establishing alliances with multiple species, we may be facing a fundamental shift in the galactic power structure. Our expansion doctrine has relied on technological and tactical superiority. If that advantage no longer exists, you're suggesting we negotiate from a position of weakness? Thexvor's voice carried dangerous undertones. I'm suggesting we consider alternatives to our traditional approach. The humans seem to prefer alliance building to conquest. If we can't defeat them militarily, perhaps we should examine what they're offering their allies. General Carvex spoke again. Our intelligence division has compiled reports on human activities throughout the Outer Rim. They consistently offer advanced technology, medical assistance, and trade opportunities in exchange for peaceful cooperation. Their allies appear to benefit significantly from these relationships. While we drain our resources maintaining control over rebellious conquered territories, Admiral Nexthar added, perhaps there are lessons to be learned. Thexvor's compound eyes fixed on Admiral Vexhai. What is your recommendation, Admiral? This was the moment Vexhai had been preparing for throughout the long journey back to Kythera space. Military tradition demanded aggressive response to any challenge. But military reality suggested that aggression might lead to disaster. Supreme Commander, I recommend we establish diplomatic contact with the humans. Not from weakness, but from pragmatism. We need to understand their capabilities, their intentions, and their limitations before committing to any course of action. Diplomacy is not the Kythera way, Thexvor stated. Neither is defeat, sir. And, based on what I observed, conventional military action against these humans would likely result in significant losses with minimal probability of success. The command chamber fell silent as the Council of War considered their options. For 3,000 years, the Kythera had known only one response to challenges: overwhelming force. The possibility that force might not be sufficient was outside their experience. Admiral Vexhai, Thexvor finally spoke. You will return to human space. You will establish formal contact with their leadership. You will gather intelligence on their true capabilities and intentions. Most importantly, you will determine whether coexistence is possible. And if they prove hostile, then we prepare for a war unlike any in our history. But first, we learn everything we can about our potential enemy. As the transmission ended, Vexhai reflected on the unprecedented nature of his orders. For the first time in Kythera history, they were approaching another species not as conquerors, but as potential equals. The implications were staggering. Hours later, as the Eternal Conquest prepared to return to human space, Vexhai received an unexpected transmission. The caller's identity was encrypted, but the message was clear. Admiral, this is Admiral Morrison. I wanted to give you a heads up. We've been monitoring Kythera communications channels, and we know you're returning with new orders. Before you arrive, there's something you should see. What kind of something? We call it the Human Cultural Exchange Center. It's a space station in the Vega system where we host representatives from all our allied species. I think you might find it educational. Vexhai considered the offer. Standard military protocol would be to refuse any deviation from his mission parameters. But standard military protocol had already proven inadequate when dealing with humans. What would be the purpose of this visit? To show you what we're actually building out here. You've seen our military capabilities. Now see what we do with peace. 2 days later, the Eternal Conquest dropped out of hyperspace near the Vega system's 4th planet. What Vexhai saw there challenged his understanding of what was possible when different species cooperated instead of conquered. The Human Cultural Exchange Center was unlike anything in his experience. Instead of the fortress-like structures favored by most civilizations, the station appeared to be a work of art as much as a functional facility. Crystalline spires spiraled out from a central hub, each one designed to accommodate the environmental needs of different species. Impressive, isn't it? Admiral Morrison's voice came through the communication array. We built it in cooperation with 17 different species. The architectural principles alone required breakthrough advances in structural engineering. Through the viewing ports, Vexhai could see ships from dozens of different civilizations docked at the station's many bays. Commercial vessels, research ships, cultural exchange craft, all moving in carefully coordinated patterns that spoke of efficient cooperation rather than military precision. How many species are represented here? He asked. Currently, about 43 different civilizations maintain permanent facilities on the station. We host approximately 200 different species on rotating schedules for various conferences, research projects, and cultural exchanges. The numbers were staggering. The Kythera had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never successfully integrated that many different species into cooperative relationships. Their approach typically resulted in submission or elimination, not voluntary alliance. Would you like to come aboard? Morrison offered. We can provide environmental accommodation for your species. I think you'd find our approach to interspecies cooperation interesting. Vexhai found himself accepting the invitation, despite every military instinct warning him about the security implications. But if he was going to report accurately to the Supreme Commander, he needed to understand what humans had built in place of conquest. The docking process was handled with a professionalism that impressed him. Human technicians worked alongside representatives of species he'd never encountered, all coordinating the complex process of accommodating a Kithra vessel. Within hours, environmental systems had been adjusted to provide the atmospheric mixture his crew required. Admiral Morrison met him at the airlock, accompanied by what appeared to be representatives from several different species. The diversity was remarkable. Beings that breathed different atmospheres, operated under different gravity requirements, and communicated through completely different sensory modalities, all working together efficiently. "Welcome to the Cultural Exchange Center," Morrison said. "I'd like you to meet some of our colleagues. This is Ambassador Thelnara from the Arcturian Republic, Dr. Zixtal from the Vegan Medical Collective, and Engineer Prime Varketh from the Centauri Technical Institute." Each being greeted him according to their own cultural protocols, but what struck Vexheim most was their apparent comfort with each other's presence. The Arcturians' crystalline form seemed incompatible with the vegans' aquatic nature, yet they obviously worked together regularly. "How do you manage such diversity?" Vexhai asked as they toured the station's central facilities. "Very carefully," Morrison replied with a smile. "It took us nearly 20 years to develop the protocols for this level of cooperation. Lots of mistakes, lots of learning, lots of compromise. But the results speak for themselves. They passed through research laboratories where beings from different worlds collaborated on projects that seemed to combine multiple technological paradigms. Cultural centers displayed art and literature from dozens of civilizations. Training facilities where young beings from various species learned together. What do you gain from all this?" Vexhai asked. "Everything," Dr. Zixtal replied, her translated voice carrying obvious enthusiasm. "Medical techniques that work across multiple physiologies. Engineering solutions that no single species could develop alone. Scientific discoveries that result from combining different approaches to understanding reality. And the costs. Time, patience, and the willingness to change our assumptions," Ambassador Thelnara answered. "But compared to the costs of constant warfare, these seem rather modest." As the tour continued, Vexhai found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about interspecies relationships. The Kithra model assumed that different species were fundamentally incompatible, that cooperation was impossible except through subjugation. But here was evidence that voluntary cooperation could produce results beyond what any single civilization could achieve. "Admiral Morrison," he said finally, "I need to ask directly, what would happen if the Kithra chose to continue our current policies? What would be the human response?" Morrison stopped walking and turned to face him directly. "That depends entirely on your actions. If you continue genocidal policies, we'll intervene to protect potential victims. If you attack human-allied space, we'll defend ourselves. If you choose to change course and seek peaceful coexistence, we'll work with you to make that possible. And if we refuse to change but avoid direct confrontation, then you'll find yourselves increasingly isolated as more species choose cooperation over conquest. The galaxy is changing, Admiral. The question is whether the Kithra change with it or become a relic of a more brutal past. The great assembly hall beneath the surface of Kithra Prime had not seen such tension in centuries. Built to accommodate the largest gatherings of military leadership, its cavernous interior echoed with the chittering conversations of hundreds of senior officers, each one representing different fleets, conquered territories, and military specializations. The hexagonal chamber stretched nearly a kilometer across, its walls lined with the battle standards of 3,000 years of conquest. Supreme Commander Thex Vor stood at the central podium, his ancient carapace bearing the scars of conflicts that had shaped the galaxy's power structure. Around him in concentric circles, the Council of War maintained their traditional formations, fleet admirals in the inner ring, sector commanders in the second, and specialized force leaders filling the outer tiers. The weight of tradition pressed down on everyone present. Admiral Vexhai occupied his position in the inner circle, having returned from his unprecedented diplomatic mission with intelligence that would shake the foundation of everything the Kithera believed about their place in the universe. His report had been distributed to the senior leadership, but this gathering would determine how the Dominion would respond to the first serious challenge to their supremacy in millennia. Warriors of Kithera, Thexvor began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic design. We face a situation unlike any in our history. For the first time since the Great Consolidation, we have encountered a species that may possess capabilities exceeding our own. A wave of chittering discussion swept through the assembly. Despite having read Vexhai's reports, many officers still struggled with the concept that their technological advantage might not be absolute. Admiral Vexhai will present his findings, Thexvor announced. All present will listen without interruption. Vexhai approached the central speaking position, conscious of the hundreds of compound eyes fixed upon him. These were warriors who had built their careers on the certainty of Kithera superiority. What he was about to tell them would challenge every assumption they held about warfare, conquest, and their empire's future. Fellow warriors, he began, I have observed human capabilities that exceed our current understanding of what is possible. Their weapons technology can completely annihilate matter at the molecular level with energy efficiency beyond our theoretical maximums. Their defensive systems render entire fleets invisible to our finest sensors. Their tactical maneuvering operates on principles that our computers cannot predict or counter. Impossible, interrupted Fleet Admiral Morgax from the second ring. No species could develop such capabilities without our knowledge. Yet they have, Vexhai replied calmly. I have witnessed demonstrations of their technology personally. Our instruments confirm readings that challenge fundamental assumptions about physics and engineering. Admiral Tolvar stood from her position. Assuming these reports are accurate, what are their numbers? How large is their fleet? Unknown, Vexhai admitted. Their stealth capabilities are such that we cannot determine their true force strength. What we observed was presented as a local defensive group, suggesting their total capabilities may be significantly larger. One battle group could not challenge the entire Dominion fleet, declared Admiral Kex Thursday. Even with advanced technology, numerical advantage must count for something. Must it? Vexhai asked. Their weapons operate on principles that allow single ships to generate firepower equivalent to entire squadrons of our vessels. Their stealth systems could allow small forces to appear anywhere without warning. Their alliance networks could multiply their effective strength through coordinated action with other species. General Harvex stepped forward from the specialist ranks. What about their psychological profile? Are they warriors like ourselves, or do they lack the will for sustained combat? This was perhaps the most complex question Vexhai had faced. They appear to prefer peaceful solutions and invest significantly in diplomatic relationships. However, when pressed, they demonstrate tactical thinking and strategic planning that suggests extensive military experience. Most importantly, they fight not for conquest or glory, but to protect what they value. This may make them more dangerous than traditional warriors. Explain, Supreme Commander Thexvor ordered. Warriors who fight for personal glory or territorial expansion have limits to their commitment. They may retreat when costs become too high or negotiate when faced with stronger opposition. But defenders fighting to protect their homes, their families, their way of life, such beings will accept any sacrifice rather than surrender. Silence settled over the assembly as the implications became clear. The Kithera understood military honor and the warrior code, but their expansion had always been driven by desire for greater power rather than desperate defense of survival. Fleet Admiral Nex, Thar spoke from her position. You mentioned their alliance systems. How extensive are these relationships? They appear to have established cooperative agreements with dozens of species across multiple sectors. More concerning, these alliances appear to be voluntary partnerships rather than tributary relationships. Their allies fight alongside them because they choose to, not because they're forced to. And our intelligence networks? Compromised, Vexhai stated flatly. They demonstrated knowledge of our most classified operations. Either they have surveillance capabilities we cannot detect, or they have agents within our own command structure. The disturbed chittering that followed this revelation spoke to every officer's worst fears. Military effectiveness depended on secure communications and reliable intelligence. If the humans could penetrate Kythera security systems, then strategic planning became nearly impossible. Admiral Zarkex stood to address the assembly. I propose we focus on practical matters. What would be required to defeat these humans militarily? Vexai had prepared extensively for this question. Based on observed capabilities, victory would require significant advantages in numbers, coordination, and tactical innovation. We would need to develop countermeasures for their stealth systems, defensive measures against their advanced weapons, and new maneuvering doctrines to address their quantum tactical capabilities. Time frame for such developments? Unknown. Our research divisions are analyzing the available data, but we're attempting to counter technologies we don't understand using scientific principles we haven't discovered. Conservative estimates suggest decades of intensive research, and during that time, they continue to advance their own capabilities, General Carvex observed grimly. Precisely. Any technological race favors the species with a more advanced starting position and superior research infrastructure. Supreme Commander Thexvor raised his primary arms for attention. We have heard Admiral Vexhai's military assessment. Now we must consider strategic alternatives. Admiral Nexthar, present your analysis of the diplomatic option. Admiral Nexthar moved to the speaking position, her scarred carapace telling the story of decades spent in planning rather than direct combat. Fellow warriors, we must consider the possibility that our traditional approach may not be optimal for our current situation. Angry chittering erupted from several sections of the assembly. The suggestion that Kythera military doctrine might be inadequate challenged fundamental cultural beliefs. Explain this reasoning, Admiral Morgax demanded. For 3,000 years, our expansion has been possible because we possessed technological and tactical superiority over every species we encountered. Our doctrine of immediate conquest and elimination was efficient because it could be quickly executed with minimal risk. However, that doctrine assumes continued technological advantage. You suggest we abandon 3 millennia of successful military tradition? Fleet Admiral Tulvar's voice carried dangerous undertones. I suggest we adapt our strategy to match changing realities. The humans offer an alternative model, technological advancement through cooperation rather than conquest. Their allies appear to benefit from these relationships while maintaining their cultural independence. Weakness, Admiral Kex Thursday declared. Cooperation implies equality, and there can be only one supreme force in any region of space. Can there? Next are challenged. The humans seem to have achieved remarkable technological advancement while maintaining peaceful relationships with dozens of species. Perhaps absolute dominance is less efficient than we believed. General Harvex stepped forward. What exactly are you proposing? Negotiated coexistence. We maintain control of our current territories while establishing trade and technological exchange relationships with the Human Alliance. We benefit from their technological capabilities while they benefit from our military expertise. You would have the Kythera serve as mercenaries for these humans? The outrage in Admiral Zarkex's voice echoed throughout the chamber. I would have the Kythera survive and prosper rather than commit to a war we may not be able to win. Nexthar replied sharply. Supreme Commander Thexvor gestured for silence as debate threatened to erupt across the entire assembly. Admiral Vexhai, during your contact with the humans, did they specify terms for peaceful coexistence? They did, Supreme Commander. Cessation of genocidal activities against conquered populations, withdrawal from what they consider their sphere of influence, respect for the territorial sovereignty of their allies. In exchange, they offered technological cooperation, trade relationships, and mutual defense agreements. And if we refuse these terms, they made it clear that continued aggressive expansion toward their territory would be met with military resistance. They also indicated they would intervene to prevent genocide against any species, regardless of location. The implications were sobering. The humans were essentially demanding that the Kithra abandon their fundamental approach to territorial control while threatening military intervention if they refused. Fleet Admiral Morgax spoke into the silence. These terms amount to surrender. They demand we abandon our expansion, change our internal policies, and submit to their supervision. This is unacceptable. The alternative may be a war we cannot win, Admiral Nextar pointed out. Better to die as warriors than live as subjects, Admiral Kex Thursday declared, his sentiment echoed by chittering approval from much of the assembly. Supreme Commander Thex Vor studied the faces of his senior officers, reading the complex mix of military pride, strategic concern, and cultural confusion that marked this unprecedented situation. For 3,000 years, these warriors had known their place in the galaxy and their path to greater glory. Now that certainty was being challenged by the emergence of a species that might be their equal or superior. We will recess for individual consultation, he announced finally. Each admiral will prepare detailed recommendations for their respective fleets and territories. We reconvene at the next cycle to reach final decisions. As the assembly began to disperse, small groups of officers gathered for intense discussion. The fundamental question facing each leader was whether the Kithra could adapt to a galaxy where they were no longer the dominant force, or whether their culture demanded continued expansion regardless of the consequences. Admiral Vexhai found himself approached by several younger officers who had served under his command during various campaigns. Their questions reflected the uncertainty that was spreading throughout the military hierarchy. "Sir," Commander Yeltrix asked quietly, "do you really believe these humans are as powerful as your reports suggest?" "Commander, I wish I could tell you that I had misunderstood what I witnessed. But the evidence is overwhelming. We are no longer the most advanced military force in this galaxy." "Then what do we do?" Vexhai looked around the ancient chamber, built to celebrate 3 millennia of conquest and domination. The weight of tradition was enormous, but so was the responsibility to ensure the survival and prosperity of a species. "We learn," he said finally. "We adapt. We find a way to maintain our honor while accepting that the galaxy has changed around us. And if the Supreme Commander chooses war, then we serve faithfully and hope that courage and determination can overcome technological disadvantage," Vexhai replied. "But I pray that wisdom prevails over pride." 5 years had passed since the first encounter between the Kithra Dominion and the United Earth Alliance. The Grand Assembly Hall beneath Kithra Prime looked very different now, its ancient walls adorned with new symbols alongside the traditional battle standards. Where once only the hexagonal emblems of conquest had decorated the chamber, now there were representations of technological achievement, diplomatic success, and cooperative ventures. Admiral Vexhai, now bearing the title of Cultural Liaison Admiral, stood before an assembly that would have been unimaginable just years earlier. Alongside the traditional ranks of Kithra military leadership, representatives from 12 different allied species occupied specially designed seating areas. The chamber's environmental systems have been extensively modified to accommodate beings who breathe different atmospheres and operated under different gravitational requirements. Supreme Commander Thex Vor, his ancient carapace now bearing new ceremonial markings that indicated diplomatic as well as military achievements, addressed the gathering with words that reflected how profoundly the Dominion had changed. "Fellow warriors and honored allies," he began, "we gather today to commemorate the 5th anniversary of what our historians have termed the Great Adaptation. 5 years ago, we faced a choice that challenged everything we believed about strength, honor, and survival. Today, we celebrate the wisdom of choosing cooperation over conquest. The transformation had not been easy or immediate. The decision to negotiate with the humans had split the Council of War, resulting in a period of internal conflict that nearly shattered the Dominion. Conservative factions led by Admiral Morgax had demanded military action against the human alliance, believing that any compromise represented unacceptable weakness. Progressive elements rallied around Admiral Nextar's arguments for adaptation and cooperation. The crisis had reached its peak when Admiral Morgax attempted a military coup, seizing control of the Fourth Fleet and launching unauthorized attacks against human allied worlds. The resulting confrontation had provided a harsh demonstration of the technological gap between Kythera and human military capabilities. Vexai remembered that battle with painful clarity. The Fourth Fleet had represented the finest of traditional Kythera military doctrine, disciplined formations, overwhelming firepower, and tactical aggression refined over millennia of conquest. Against human defensive forces, those advantages had proven irrelevant. The human response had been swift, precise, and devastating. Ships that should have been impossible to detect had appeared throughout the Fourth Fleet's formation. Weapons that operated outside conventional physics had disabled Kythera vessels without destroying them. Most humbling of all, the entire engagement had lasted less than 30 minutes. Admiral Morrison had personally overseen the rescue operations that followed, her ships working alongside Kythera vessels to evacuate survivors from disabled ships. The message was clear. Humans possessed the capability to completely destroy the rebel fleet, but chose mercy instead. We could have ended this with massive casualties, Morrison had explained during the post-battle negotiations. But dead warriors can't learn from their mistakes. We prefer enemies who become friends to enemies who become graves. That demonstration of restrained power had accomplished what years of diplomatic discussion could not. The remaining conservative factions within the Kythera leadership finally understood that human superiority was not theoretical, but demonstrated fact. More importantly, they began to comprehend that human mercy was a choice, not a weakness. The transition period that followed had been the most challenging in Kythera history. Centuries of military culture had to be reevaluated and adapted. Conquered populations that had been suppressed for generations had to be integrated as equals rather than subjects. Most difficult of all, the concept of voluntary cooperation had to replace the tradition of imposed dominance. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the chief human cultural advisor assigned to the Dominion, had played a crucial role in managing this transformation. Her patient work with Kythera social scientists had helped develop integration protocols that respected both species' values while building frameworks for cooperation. The key insight, Dr. Vasquez had explained during one of their early planning sessions, is that strength can be measured in many ways. Military power is one form of strength, but there's also technological innovation, cultural resilience, diplomatic influence, and cooperative capability. The humans didn't become powerful by maximizing one type of strength. We became powerful by developing all of them simultaneously. Now, 5 years later, the results of that philosophy were evident throughout the transformed Dominion. The chamber where Admiral Vexai now stood hosted regular conferences between species that had once been bitter enemies. Kythera engineering expertise was being combined with human theoretical physics to produce technological innovations beyond what either species could achieve alone. Admiral Vexai, Supreme Commander Thex Vor called, "Please present the annual cooperation assessment." Vexai approached the central podium, his movements reflecting the confidence of a leader who had successfully guided his people through an unprecedented transformation. The data he was about to present would have seemed impossible just years earlier. "Fellow beings," he began, addressing the mixed assembly with words that acknowledged their diversity. "The 5th year of the cooperative dominion has exceeded all projections for successful integration." He activated the holographic display system, which had been enhanced with human technology to provide three-dimensional tactical presentations visible to all species present. Military efficiency has increased by 67% through the integration of human stealth technology with Kythera firepower systems. Our joint patrol fleets now protect twice the territorial area with 40% fewer vessels than traditional Kythera-only formations. The display showed fleet compositions that would have been unthinkable under the old system. Kythera heavy cruisers operated alongside human stealth destroyers and support vessels from 6 different allied species. Each ship contributed specialized capabilities that enhanced the overall effectiveness of the combined force. Technological advancement has accelerated beyond previous rates through cooperative research programs. The new space-folding manufacturing facilities have increased our shipbuilding capacity by 300%, while reducing resource consumption by half. Images of the joint research stations appeared on the display, showing laboratories where beings from different worlds collaborated on projects that combined multiple technological paradigms. The results included advances in faster-than-light travel, energy generation, material science, and biological systems that no single species could have achieved independently. Most significantly, Vexi continued. Population satisfaction indices across all integrated territories have reached historical maximums. The elimination of suppression protocols and the introduction of voluntary cooperation frameworks have resulted in unprecedented social stability. This transformation had been perhaps the most difficult aspect of the Great Adaptation. Generations of conquered peoples had lived under Kithra military occupation, their culture suppressed, and their populations exploited. Converting these relationships into voluntary partnerships had required fundamental changes in governance, resource distribution, and social policy. The success of these changes was evident in the assembly itself. Representatives from former subject species now participated as equals in dominion planning and decision-making. What had once been an empire built on fear had become an alliance built on mutual benefit. Ambassador Thelnara of the Arcturian Republic rose from her crystalline seating array to address the assembly. On behalf of the Allied Species Council, I want to express our gratitude for the Kithra commitment to cooperative governance. The transformation we have witnessed represents one of the most remarkable adaptations in galactic history. Dr. Zixtal from the Vegan Medical Collective added her voice to the recognition. The integration of Kithra biological expertise with human medical technology and our own physiological knowledge has produced breakthrough advances in life extension and disease prevention across 17 different species. This cooperation saves millions of lives annually. Engineer Prime Varketh from the Centauri Technical Institute contributed his assessment. The combination of Kithra manufacturing precision with human theoretical innovation and our own practical experience has revolutionized industrial production throughout this sector. We are literally building a better galaxy together. Admiral Morrison, now serving as the human liaison to the Cooperative Dominion, stood to address the assembly. 5 years ago, we faced each other as potential enemies across a void of misunderstanding. Today, we stand together as partners in building something greater than any of our civilizations could achieve alone. She gestured toward the mixed crews visible through the chamber's viewing ports, where beings from multiple species worked side by side on various projects. The humans have a saying, "The whole is greater than the sum of its parts." This cooperation proves that wisdom applies not just to individuals, but to entire civilizations. Supreme Commander Thexvor rose for his concluding remarks. 5 years ago, we believed that strength could only be measured in terms of conquest and domination. We have learned that true strength lies in the ability to adapt, to grow, to become something better than what we were before. He paused, his compound eyes surveying the assembly that represented the future of their civilization. The ancient Kithra way was built on the assumption that only one species could be supreme in any region of space. We now know that multiple species can be supreme together, each contributing their unique capabilities to collective strength that exceeds what any could achieve in isolation. The Cooperative Dominion faces challenges that would have destroyed the old empire. Pirates who operate across multiple sectors, natural disasters that threaten entire star systems, research projects that require resources beyond what any single species possesses. But we face these challenges together, and together we overcome them. Admiral Vexi found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The transformation had required courage from leaders who chose uncertainty over tradition, wisdom from planners who designed new systems of governance, and patience from populations who had to learn to work with former enemies. Most importantly, it had required the recognition that strength and honor could take many forms. The humans had shown that mercy could be a form of power, that cooperation could be a military advantage, and that voluntary alliance could be more stable than forced submission. As the assembly concluded with ceremonial exchanges between the different species, Vexi received a private communication from Admiral Morrison. "Admiral," she said, "I wanted to personally thank you for the courage you showed 5 years ago, reporting accurate intelligence when it challenged everything your culture believed about its place in the galaxy. That took real military honor." "Thank you, Admiral Morrison. But I must ask, what would have happened if we had chosen differently? If the Kithra had committed to military action against your alliance?" Morrison was quiet for a moment. "We would have defended ourselves and our allies. But I'm glad we never had to find out the full cost of that choice. The galaxy is better with the Kithra as partners rather than enemies." "In the future? What challenges do you see ahead?" "The same challenges every civilization faces when it chooses to grow rather than stagnate. There are other species out there, some hostile, some simply different. There are scientific mysteries to solve, social problems to address, and new frontiers to explore. The difference is that we'll face these challenges together." As the day's ceremonies concluded, Vexhai stood in the observation deck of the assembly hall, looking out at the transformed surface of Kithra Prime. Where once military installations had dominated the landscape, now research facilities, cultural centers, and diplomatic complexes shared space with traditional warrior training grounds. Ships from dozens of different species moved through the orbital traffic patterns, their diverse designs reflecting the technological and aesthetic traditions of multiple civilizations. Cargo vessels carried goods and materials for cooperative projects. Research ships departed for joint exploration missions. Cultural exchange vessels brought visitors interested in learning about the cooperative dominion's unprecedented success. The humans had been right about one thing, Vexhai realized. True strength wasn't about dominating others. It was about becoming the best possible version of yourself, while helping others do the same. The Kithra had discovered that their greatest achievement wasn't the conquest of hundreds of worlds, but the transformation of themselves from destroyers into builders. And in a galaxy full of wonders waiting to be discovered and challenges waiting to be overcome, the cooperative dominion stood ready to face the future together, stronger than any empire built on conquest could ever be. The age of solitary supremacy was ending. The age of cooperative excellence had begun.